My husband opened the front door at 1143 at night and told me to leave my own house. His pregnant mistress stood behind him in my slippers, one hand on her stomach, the other resting on the staircase banister. I had refinished myself. Snow was blowing sideways across the porch, and he had already packed my suitcase. What he didn't know was that the house, the cars, the accounts, and the future he was smiling about were all tied to one document he had mocked for 5 years. My name is Claire Whitaker. I was 34 years old that night. A senior claims analyst for a mid-size insurance company in Denver, Colorado. Which meant I spent my days reading fine print other people ignored. I understood signatures, dates, clauses, exclusions, and the quiet power of a document nobody thinks will ever matter. My husband, Evan. I used to laugh about that. He said I could turn a grocery receipt into a legal argument if someone gave me enough coffee. He wasn't wrong. But he forgot that I had read our prenuptial agreement line by line before I married him. He forgot I had asked for one not because I was cold, but because my father had died, leaving my mother with nothing but promises. He forgot that silence was not the same thing as surrender. And by morning, when my lawyer's office opened, Evan Whitaker was going to learn the difference. The first thing I noticed was not Lila's rounded belly or the fact that she was wearing my pale blue robe. It was the suitcase. My suitcase. The old gray one with the cracked wheel that Evan had always complained about when we traveled. It sat by his foot on the porch rug. Zipped badly. One sleeve of my winter sweater caught in the teeth like he had packed me in a hurry and without care. "Claire," he said, in the calm voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while doing something cruel. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be." Snowflakes clung to his dark hair and melted on his collar. He had not put on a coat for me. He had opened the door like a man taking out trash. Not like a husband ending a marriage. I looked past him into the house. The fireplace was lit. The hallway lamp was glowing. My wedding picture still hung beside the kitchen entrance, though someone had turned it slightly crooked. Behind him, Lila shifted in my robe and gave me a small, practiced look of apology. The kind people wear when they have already decided to keep what they stole. "She can't stay at her apartment tonight," Evan said. "Her heat went out. She's pregnant." "Claire, you're not. I need you to be decent." There it was. Decent. That word people use when they want you to bleed politely. I stared at him. At the man who had once promised never to make me feel disposable. And I felt something inside me go very still. I had suspected the affair for 3 months. A missed dinner here. A cologne shirt there. A receipt from a restaurant in Boulder where he claimed he had never been. I had not confronted him because I wanted truth, not performance. I had learned at work that guilty people become very careful when they know they are being watched. So I watched quietly. Evan thought my calmness was ignorance. He mistook my lack of shouting for weakness. That was the story of our marriage near the end. He moved through our home like his wants were weather and I was supposed to dress for them. If he was tired, I was too sensitive. If he was late, I was suspicious. If I asked a question, I was ruining the peace. The house on Maple Ridge Drive had been my piece before it became his stage. I bought it 2 years before we married, when I was still living on canned soup and overtime bonuses. It was a small brick house with a blue front door, a maple tree in the yard, and a kitchen window that caught the morning sun. Evan moved in after our wedding and immediately called it our first real home, as if ownership began when he approved of it. At first, I liked hearing him say, "our." I wanted to be generous. I wanted marriage to feel like building something, not guarding something. So I let him repaint the office, choose the couch, install the expensive sound system, and plant white roses along the fence because his mother said they looked more respectable. I let him make himself visible in every room, but I never transferred the deed. I never added him to the title. And I never forgot the prenup his mother had called unromantic while smiling over her champagne glass at our rehearsal dinner. "A woman who plans for divorce," Marilyn Whitaker had said softly. usually creates one. Evan had squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Ignore her. It's just paperwork." Only it was never just paperwork. Not to me. Paperwork was how widows kept their homes. Paperwork was how hospitals knew who could make decisions. Paperwork was how men like Evan could say one thing in candlelight and another thing when a younger woman was crying in the hallway. Paperwork was memory when everyone else tried to rewrite the room. Lila stepped closer behind him. She was 27. Beautiful in a fragile way, people protected instinctively. With glossy brown hair and a face that always seemed on the edge of tears. I recognized her from Evan's company holiday party. She had been introduced as a project coordinator. She had complimented my earrings. Then later posted a photo with Evan in the background. Cropped just enough to feel accidental. "I'm sorry," she said now, though her hand tightened around the banister. "I didn't want it to happen this way." That sentence almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so careful. She did not say she didn't want it to happen. She said this way. She wanted my husband. My house. My bed. My Christmas wreath, still hanging in the hall. She simply preferred a softer transfer. Evan rubbed his forehead like I was exhausting him. "I'll pay for a hotel for a few nights. We'll talk after things calm down." He reached into his pocket and held out his credit card. Not cash. Not keys. Not concern. A card with his name on it. Offered like charity on my own porch, while my fingers went numb around the strap of my purse. I did not take it. I looked at the suitcase again and thought of the closet upstairs. He had packed fast. Which meant he had missed the fireproof document box on the top shelf behind my old winter boots. Inside that box were copies of the deed, our prenup, bank statements, and a sealed envelope from my attorney. June Alvarez. Marked in her neat black handwriting, in case of marital breach. When June made that envelope, I had felt embarrassed. "This feels dramatic," I told her. She had looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Good contracts feel dramatic until the day they become practical." June had represented my mother after my father died. Back when men from the bank kept calling everything complicated. I trusted June more than I trusted romance. The prenup had a fidelity clause Evan hated, then forgot. It did not punish a mistake. It addressed abandonment, marital misconduct, unauthorized occupancy of premarital property, and any attempt to force me from my legal residence. Evan had signed it because he was proud then, because he made more money at the time, and because his mother told him not to look scared, standing in the snow. I realized he had broken 3 clauses in one night without even taking his hands out of his pockets. He had brought another woman into my home. He had attempted to remove me from it. And if the child was his, he had given June exactly what she once called the cleanest possible trigger. I could almost hear her voice, calm and dry, telling me not to speak emotionally when paper could speak better. "Claire," Evan said. Sharper now. "Say something." He wanted me to scream. I could see it. Screaming would make him the tired man with the pregnant girlfriend and me the unstable wife on the porch. Screaming would give him a story to tell his mother, his coworkers, his friends. I had spent years watching people build shelters out of other people's reactions, so I gave him nothing. I bent down, lifted the suitcase, and the broken wheel scraped across the porch boards. Lila's eyes widened slightly. Evan blinked, disappointed by my obedience and unsettled by it at the same time. That was the first moment he sensed something was wrong. Not wrong enough to stop him. Just wrong enough to make his mouth tighten. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "Because cruel people love narrating your humiliation as maturity. We'll figure out the house later." I paused at the top step and looked back at him. The snow hit my face. Cold and sharp. Inside. The fire crackled behind him. My robe slipped off Lila's shoulder, and she pulled it closed like modesty mattered now. "No," I said quietly. "We won't." Evan frowned. But I was already walking down the steps. I did not slam the door because it was my door. I did not curse him because he would have enjoyed repeating it. I dragged that half-packed suitcase through 4 inches of snow. Past the maple tree I had planted before I knew his name. And I let him think he had won the night. My car was still in the driveway, half buried under snow because Evan had parked his SUV in the garage. He had not even cleared the windshield. I put the suitcase in the trunk, sat behind the wheel, and gripped the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. The house glowed in the rearview mirror, warm and golden, with 2 shadows moving behind the curtains. For 1 full minute, I could not breathe right. Not because I wanted him back. That part surprised me. The grief was not for Evan exactly. It was for the woman I had been when I believed patience could be mistaken for love and service could be mistaken for partnership. It was for every dinner I made while he checked his phone. Every apology I accepted because I wanted the house quiet. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Evan appeared on the screen. "Don't be dramatic. I'll call you tomorrow. Please don't involve other people." I stared at that last sentence until the heater began blowing lukewarm air against my knees. Please don't involve other people. Not because he wanted privacy. Because some men only believe in dignity when exposure becomes possible. I took a screenshot. Then I forwarded it to my personal email. The one Evan never checked because he thought my life was boring. After that, I opened my notes app and wrote the time. The weather. What he said. What Lila wore. Where the suitcase had been placed. And the exact words about the hotel. Claims work teaches you that memory becomes evidence only when you pin it down, before fear edits it. A 2 obsprezece, a m. I drove to a 24-hour hotel near the interstate. The clerk was a young man with tired eyes and a Santa hat tilted sideways. Even though Christmas had passed 2 weeks earlier, he looked at my wet hair, my thin sweater, the suitcase with snow melting off its wheels, and said nothing except, "Do you need a room away from the elevators?" That kindness almost broke me. I nodded, signed the receipt, and carried the suitcase to room 312. The carpet smelled faintly of bleach and old cigarettes. The heater rattled under the window. I sat on the edge of the bed and unzipped what Evan had packed for me. 2 sweaters, 1 pair of jeans, no boots, no toiletries, no medication, no laptop charger. But at the bottom, by pure accident, he had packed my red folder from the kitchen drawer, the one labeled Home Warranties. He must have grabbed it thinking it was useless. Inside were appliance receipts, contractor invoices, and beneath them, because I never trusted obvious hiding places, a certified copy of the Prenup. I touched the folder and felt my pulse settle. Evan had thrown me out in the snow to make room for the woman carrying his child. He had expected tears, begging, maybe a few angry calls he could ignore while Lila warmed herself by my fireplace. Instead, he had handed me a timestamp, a witness, a text message, and a clean breach before sunrise. Some betrayals arrive like storms. Others arrive like paperwork waiting for business hours. I did not sleep. I showered, wrapped myself in a hotel towel, and watched the snow fall under the parking lot lights. At Chapta Cinci, Shishas, a.m. I placed the red folder on the small desk beside the hotel phone. At 8:00 exactly, I called June Alvarez. When she answered, her voice was bright and professional. "Claire," she said. "What happened?" I looked at the suitcase Evan had packed, the melting snow by the door, and the prenup lying open beneath my hand. My voice did not shake when I answered. "He activated it for us." June did not gasp. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. She let the silence sit for 3 seconds, then asked for facts in the order they mattered. Time of removal, location, who was present, exact words spoken, whether I still had keys, whether Evan had changed the locks, whether he had threatened me physically, whether there was another occupant in the house, whether that occupant was pregnant, and whether Evan had acknowledged paternity. I answered like I was giving a recorded statement at work. Not describing the collapse of my marriage from a hotel desk with wet shoes by the heater. June listened without interrupting except to say, "Slow down there," when my voice tried to outrun my breathing. When I finished, she said, "Claire, do not go back alone. Do not warn him. Do not negotiate by text. Send me everything." I emailed the screenshots. A photo of the suitcase. A photo of my room receipt. And a scan of the prenup from the hotel lobby printer. The clerk let me use it without charging me after seeing my hands shake over the glass. I sent June the notes I had typed in the car. 2. She replied 9 minutes later with 4 words, "This is very clean." Clean. Such a strange word for something so humiliating. My marriage had split open in the cold. But on paper, the wound had edges. Evan had not simply cheated. He had relocated his pregnant mistress into my premarital residence and attempted to displace me from it. The prenup called that abandonment and unauthorized occupancy. June called it enforceable. I called it the first steady thing I had touched all night, by dziewięć. June had filed an emergency notice asserting my sole ownership and demanding Evan vacate the property with any unauthorized occupant. She also triggered the marital misconduct clause tied to our joint investment account, the spousal support waiver, and reimbursement for any household funds used to support the affair. None of it sounded emotional when she explained it. That was the beauty of it. It didn't need to. While June worked, my phone filled with Evan's messages. At first, they were soft. "Hope you're okay. Let's be adults." I didn't mean for last night to feel harsh. Then, they became managerial. "I need access to the mortgage files. Don't touch the accounts. My mom says we should mediate." By noon, the softness had burned off completely. "Claire, answer your phone. You're making this worse." I didn't answer. That was harder than people think. Silence sounds powerful later. When the story has an ending. In the moment, silence feels like swallowing broken glass. Every buzz of my phone pulled up a memory of the man I once loved, Evan carrying paint cans into the kitchen. Evan dancing barefoot with me after we signed the closing paperwork on the new windows. Evan telling me no one had ever understood him the way I did. But memory is not evidence of love. Sometimes it is evidence of what you kept forgiving. I sat in that hotel room with vending machine coffee and let the man in my phone reveal himself one message at a time. By early afternoon, he stopped pretending he cared where I had slept. He cared about whether I had talked to June. At Doi Prezecha. Marilyn called. Evan's mother never texted when she wanted control. She called. Because a ringing phone feels like a demand. I watched her name glow on the screen until it stopped. Then came the voicemail. Her voice was smooth, disappointed, and sharp around the edges. Like fine china with a crack in it. "Claire, sweetheart. I don't know what Evan has told you. But this is not the time to behave vindictively. There is a baby involved now. A family must make room for new life. You have always been practical. So I'm asking you to be gracious. Evan says you left in a very dramatic state. Please don't embarrass yourself by turning a private matter into a legal circus." I played it twice. Not because I needed to suffer. Because I needed to hear the exact words. A family must make room. In Marilyn's language, family meant Evan. Practical meant obedient. Gracious meant erased. She had never raised her voice to me in 5 years. She didn't have to. She could slice a person open with manners. I forwarded the voicemail to June. She replied, "Keep it." Then, a minute later, "And do not call her back." I almost smiled for the first time that day. June knew the Whitakers. Not personally, but legally. Every family like theirs had a vocabulary. Respect meant hierarchy. Forgiveness meant no consequences. Privacy meant the powerful got to choose the version everyone else heard. That evening, Evan changed tactics. He sent a photo of our dining room table with takeout containers on it. Lila's purse sat in the chair that had been mine. "You're being unreasonable," he wrote. "She's sick and scared. I can't put her out in a storm." I stared at that photo longer than I should have. Not because of Lila's purse. Because my mother's table runner was folded underneath the food containers like a rag. That runner had been stitched by my mother the winter after my father died. She made it from scraps of his old work shirts. Blue and gray and soft from years of washing. Evan knew that. He had heard the story. He had complimented it when we first hosted Thanksgiving. Now it was under greasy cardboard boxes while he explained compassion to me from inside a house he did not own. I saved the photo. Then I set the phone face down and cried for exactly 6 minutes. I know, because the hotel alarm clock blinked beside the bed. Red numbers, cutting the dark. 6 minutes was all I could afford before grief became a place to live instead of a weather system to pass through. After that, I washed my face, opened my laptop, and began building a timeline. I listed every suspicious charge from the last 6 months. 2 hotel bars. A boutique maternity shop. Flowers I never received. A rideshare from Evan's office to Lila's apartment building on a night he said he was stuck in a quarterly meeting. I downloaded statements, saved receipts, and sorted them into folders. Not because I wanted to punish him for every lie. Because lies become smaller when placed in rows. The next morning, June called again. "We have a hearing request filed. But first we're sending formal notice. He may leave voluntarily when he realizes the exposure." I looked around the hotel room. At the suitcase, Evan had packed like a punishment. "He won't," I said. June paused. "Why?" I watched snow slide down the window in slow white sheets. "Because he thinks everything becomes his, if he stands in it long enough." She was quiet for a moment. "Then we will remind him that possession and ownership are not the same thing." That sentence stayed with me. It applied to the house. It applied to marriage. It applied to all the years Evan had occupied my kindness and mistaken it for a deed. On the 3rd day, a process server delivered the notice to Maple Ridge Drive. I know because Evan called me 17 times in 20 minutes. When I did not answer, he left one voicemail that began calm and ended ugly. "You had no right to humiliate me at my own home," he said. "You know Lila is high risk. If something happens to this baby because of your stress campaign, that is on you." There it was. The new story. I was not a wife thrown out in the snow. I was a stress campaign. Lila was not a mistress moved into another woman's home. She was a vulnerable mother. Evan was not a man facing consequences. He was a protector. I sat on the hotel bed and listened to him build the lie in real time. Brick by brick. For a second, guilt moved through me out of habit. That was the most embarrassing part of healing. Even when you know someone is manipulating you, the old training still lights up. Be reasonable. Don't hurt anyone. Don't be difficult. Then I looked at the photo of the suitcase again. 2 sweaters. No boots. No medication. He had not cared if I was safe in the snow. He cared that consequences had arrived wearing my name. I sent that voicemail to June. 2. She responded with a single sentence, "He is helping us." I almost laughed then. A small dry sound in the empty room. Evan had always believed the loudest person controlled the room. He did not understand that every angry message, every entitled voicemail, every written demand was a little signature at the bottom of his own undoing. By Friday, Marilyn escalated. She sent a family email with the subject line, "A request for compassion." She copied Evan's sister, 2 cousins, and an uncle I had met 3 times. In it, she wrote that Evan and I were experiencing a painful transition. That Lila was expecting a child under complicated circumstances. And that I was using legal technicalities to remove a pregnant woman from shelter during winter. Legal technicalities. My ownership was a technicality. My marriage vows were apparently flexible. But my boundary was cruel. I read the email standing beside the hotel ice machine. because that was where my phone had enough signal. A man in a ski jacket walked past me with a bucket and pretended not to see my face change. I did not reply to the group. I forwarded it to June. Then to my private archive. After that, I opened a blank document and wrote one sentence for myself: I am not responsible for making betrayal comfortable. I printed it in the lobby and folded it into my wallet behind my driver's license. It sounds small, but that sentence became a handrail. The formal response from Evan's attorney arrived the following Monday. His lawyer claimed Evan had established marital residency, that removing Lila would create undue hardship, and that the prenup's misconduct clause was punitive and emotionally inflammatory. June read the letter to me over the phone, and I could hear the amusement under her professionalism. They're trying to turn sympathy into standing, she said. It won't work. Still, the waiting wore me down. Legal truth moves slower than personal cruelty. Evan and Lila were in my house while I paid for a hotel room with points and a credit card. My mail was still going there. My winter boots were still in the closet. My mother's table runner was still under their mess, unless one of them had finally noticed it was not decoration. On the 6th night, I drove past Maple Ridge Drive. I should not have. But I did. I parked across the street under a bare cottonwood tree and looked at the house through falling snow. Lila's car was in the driveway. Evan's SUV was in the garage. Warm light shone from the upstairs bedroom. My bedroom. The blue front door looked darker at night. Almost black. For a moment, I wanted to run across the street and pound on that door until my hands hurt. I wanted to tell Lila to take off my robe. Tell Evan to get his shoes off my hardwood. Tell the house itself I was sorry I had let strangers wear the shape of my life. Instead, I stayed in the car and breathed into my scarf. That was when I saw Mrs. Donnelly from next door step onto her porch. She was 72. Retired. And famous on our block for knowing when every trash bin was placed 6 inches too far from the curb. She looked toward my car, squinted through the snow, and then lifted one gloved hand. Not a wave exactly. More like recognition. I rolled down my window when she came to the curb. "Claire," she asked. Her voice was low. I nodded, suddenly ashamed of being seen outside my own home like a trespasser. She looked back at my house, then leaned closer. "I saw what happened that night," she said. "My porch camera caught most of it. Him putting your suitcase out. That woman coming in before you left. I saved it. Just in case." I could not speak. The snow landed on the steering wheel and melted between my fingers. Mrs. Donnelly reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small white envelope with my name written across it in careful blue ink. "My grandson downloaded it for me," she said. "I figured a woman doesn't leave her own house in a snowstorm with no boots, unless somebody made her." I held the envelope like it weighed more than paper. Inside was a flash drive. A simple little black flash drive. The kind people lose in junk drawers and desk cups. But in my palm, it felt like the first solid proof that the night had happened outside my body. Outside Evan's version. Outside Marilyn's polished vocabulary. When I looked up, Mrs. Donnelly's face had hardened in a way I had never seen. "And Claire," she said, glancing once more toward the glowing windows of my house. "That girl has been there before. More than once. Long before the snowstorm." I drove straight back to the hotel with Mrs. Donnelly's envelope tucked inside my coat, like something alive. I did not plug the flash drive into the lobby computer. I did not watch it in my car. I had spent enough years reading claim files to know evidence should be handled carefully, not emotionally. So I placed it in a plastic bag from the hotel coffee station, wrote the date and time across it, and called June before I let myself breathe. June answered on the second ring. When I told her what Mrs. Donnelly had given me, she went very quiet. Not surprised, quiet. Focused quiet. "Do not open it on a shared device," she said. "Bring it to my office first thing in the morning. And Claire, write down exactly how she gave it to you while it is fresh." I sat at the little hotel desk and wrote until my wrist hurt. That night, I finally understood something about betrayal. The first wound is what they do. The second wound is what they expect you to prove. Evan had put me out in the snow. But because he wore a wedding ring and spoke calmly, people were already preparing to debate whether I had misunderstood my own humiliation. Mrs. Donnelly's camera did not make the pain real. It made the lie harder to sell. At June's office the next morning, her paralegal copied the flash drive while I sat in a conference room with a paper cup of coffee I never drank. June watched the footage first without me. Through the glass wall, I saw her face remain still. But her pen stopped moving halfway through. That was how I knew it was bad. Professionals do not need dramatic expressions when facts are loud enough. When she came back in, she placed the flash drive between us. It shows Lila arriving at 9:12 p.m. with 2 bags. She said. Evan helps her inside. Adon sprzecze trezit shinoa. He brings your suitcase onto the porch. Adon sprzecze patrzeć shitre. You arrive. The audio is partial, but it catches him saying, "She's pregnant. Claire, you're not." It also catches you leaving without aggression. I stared at the table. The room felt too bright. I had remembered those words. But hearing that a machine had caught them made my skin tighten. They were no longer floating in my head. Where Evan could deny tone and Marilyn could polish cruelty into misunderstanding, they existed now. Stamped in winter dark, framed by my own blue front door, June leaned back and folded her hands. There is more. Mrs. Donnelly's earlier footage appears to show Lila entering the house on at least 4 dates when you were out of town or working late. We'll need her statement. But this changes the posture. I looked up. Posture. June's mouth tightened. It means Evan is not defending one desperate night. He is defending a pattern. Pattern. That word landed harder than affair. An affair could be dressed up as weakness, confusion, loneliness. A terrible mistake. A pattern had structure. A pattern had decisions. A pattern meant Evan had not stumbled into betrayal on a snowy night. He had rehearsed it in my house. Under my roof. While I was still washing his coffee mugs in the morning, June filed the supplemental evidence that afternoon. By sunset, Evan knew. His messages stopped for 3 hours. And somehow, that silence felt louder than the 17 calls. Then, adopt chassepue. He sent one sentence. You've been spying on me. I stared at it and almost admired the instinct. He had been caught carrying another woman into my home. And his first move was to accuse me of seeing. I did not respond. He sent another. That old woman is confused. Then another. You're going to ruin my reputation over a private mistake. Then, finally, the one that told me he was scared. My company cannot see this. Please. Claire. Just talk to me before June turns this into something neither of us can control. Neither of us. That was always Evan's favorite trick. Making his choices sound like a shared weather event. We did not break trust. We were going through a rough patch. He did not humiliate me. Things became emotional. He did not move his mistress into my house. We needed temporary space. I placed the phone face down and let every unanswered message become its own testimony. The next morning, Marilyn appeared at the hotel. I had not told her where I was staying, which meant Evan had. I saw her from the breakfast area window, stepping through the sliding doors in a camel coat. Pearls at her throat. Hair sprayed into place as if dignity could be lacquered on. She spotted me immediately and walked over with the expression of a woman around to correct a servant. Claire, she said. Not sitting down. This has gone far enough. I looked at the untouched waffle on my plate and then at her. Good morning. Marilyn. Her mouth twitched. She hated when I answered storms with weather reports. You need to withdraw whatever you filed. Evan is under terrible stress. Leela is fragile. This baby is innocent. I agree. I said. The baby is innocent. For a moment. She looked relieved. like she had found the button that still worked. Then I added, "That doesn't make my house available." The relief vanished. She lowered her voice. "Do you hear how selfish that sounds? You are a grown woman with a job. Lila has nothing." I folded my napkin slowly. "She has an apartment. She has Evan. She has choices." Marilyn's eyes sharpened. "Careful. Claire. People are already asking why you would put a pregnant woman out into the cold." I almost felt sorry for her then, because she still thought shame worked like a leash. "People can ask," I said. "June can answer." Her face changed at the sound of my lawyer's name. Not fear exactly. Recognition. She understood institutions. She respected power when it arrived on letterhead. She leaned closer. Perfume cutting through the smell of burnt hotel coffee. "You will not drag my family through mud because your pride is hurt." There it was. My pain was pride. Evan's affair was family. Lila's pregnancy was a shield. Marilyn's reputation was the emergency. I looked at her hands. Perfectly manicured. Resting on the back of the chair she had never asked permission to take. "I'm not dragging anyone," I said. "I'm standing still." She stared at me. For the first time since I had known her, Marilyn seemed unsure how to respond. She had spent years teaching me that peace depended on my flexibility. She did not know what to do with a woman who had finally become a locked door. After she left, my knees shook under the table. That was another thing people forget to mention. Boundaries can be right and still make you tremble. I carried my tray to the trash, went upstairs, and cried in the shower where nobody could hear me. Then I got dressed for work. Because rent, hotel bills, and legal retainers do not pause for heartbreak. At the office, I performed normalcy like a second job. I reviewed hail damage claims, corrected a junior analyst's coverage memo, and answered a supervisor's question about deductible language while my marriage sat open in a legal folder downtown. At Trey Prater's H, I received an email from June titled Temporary Access Order. I opened it in a bathroom stall because I needed privacy to read my life being returned in formal language. The order required Evan to grant me access to retrieve personal property and prohibited him from removing, damaging, or transferring anything from Maple Ridge Drive until the occupancy hearing. It also ordered that Lila could not remain overnight pending review of the ownership and prenup provisions. It was not final victory. June made that clear. But it was the first official line drawn through Evan's version of reality. Evan reacted within minutes. "You got her kicked out," he wrote. "Are you proud?" I read the message twice, and felt something old loosen in me. He still believed my morality depended on absorbing the consequences of his choices. He still thought I could be cornered by the word cruel. I typed nothing back. There was no sentence I could send that would teach him what he had worked so hard not to know. On Saturday morning, I returned to Maple Ridge Drive with June, a locksmith, and a civil standby officer. Snow had hardened along the curb into gray ridges. The maple tree stood bare in the yard, branches black against the pale sky. My blue front door looked the same from the outside. But when Evan opened it, the house smelled different. Vanilla perfume. Takeout. Someone else's shampoo. He had not shaved. His eyes moved from me to June, to the officer, and back to me. "This is insane," he said. "Claire. Tell them, this is insane." I stepped over the threshold without answering. My boots touched the entryway tile I had chosen alone. Years before his name appeared on my Christmas cards. For 1 second, the house seemed to inhale. Lila was in the living room, seated on my couch beneath the quilt my mother had made for my 30th birthday. She looked pale and furious. Not fragile. A duffel bag sat by her feet. When she saw me, her hand went to her stomach automatically. I wondered how many times that gesture had worked for her. How many rooms had softened around it. Mine did not. "I hope you're happy," she said, voice shaking. "I have nowhere safe to go." I looked at the designer boots beside her duffel, the expensive phone in her hand, the car keys on the coffee table. Lila. June said before I could answer. You have been instructed to collect your belongings. This is not a conversation. Lila's eyes filled instantly. June did not blink. Evan followed me from room to room while I collected what he had not packed. Medication from the bathroom. My laptop charger from the office. My winter boots from the closet. The fireproof document box. My mother's table runner. Stained now with soy sauce along one blue square. I held it for a moment in both hands, and felt anger so clean it almost steadied me. In the bedroom, I saw that Lila's hairbrush was on my nightstand. That small thing hurt more than it should have. Not the bed. Not the robe. The brush. It was ordinary. Domestic. Careless. A claim laid down one morning after betrayal had become comfortable. Evan stood behind me and said softly, I never meant to hurt you like this. I turned and looked at him. You meant for me not to matter. His face tightened. That's not fair. I almost laughed. Fairness had arrived very late, and wearing his voice. June appeared in the doorway before he could continue. Claire. We have what we need. Anna nodded and closed the document box. As we walked downstairs, Marilyn entered through the front door without knocking. Of course she did. She had always treated my home like an extension of her authority. She froze when she saw the officer. Then she recovered. Lifting her chin. I want everyone to calm down, she announced. We are going to sit at the dining room table and settle this as a family. June looked at her mildly. No, Mrs. Whitaker. We are not. Marilyn ignored her and turned to me. Claire. Enough. You got your dramatic entrance. Now, be humane. I could have walked out then. The order only required access. And I had my things. But Marilyn's eyes moved toward the dining room. Toward the table where my mother's stained runner had been. And I understood she was not done rewriting me. Evan stood behind her. Silent now. Letting his mother become the blade. Lila hovered near the stairs. Duffel in hand. Watching for the winner, Marilyn set her purse on my entry table. Your lawyer can send all the letters she wants, she said. Voice rising just enough for the officer to hear. But no judge will admire a woman who weaponizes paperwork against an unborn child. You are making yourself look bitter, Claire. And when the truth comes out, people will see that Evan simply chose responsibility. June's eyes flicked toward me. A question without words. Do you want to answer? For 5 years? I had let Marilyn's sentences pass over me because correcting her cost too much peace. For 5 years, I had swallowed little humiliations at holidays. Dinners. Baby showers. Birthdays. In my own foyer. With snow melting off my boots and my mother's stained runner in my bag. I decided peace had become too expensive. I opened the red folder. Not the fireproof box. Not the full legal file. Just the red folder Evan had accidentally packed for me in the suitcase he threw into the snow. Inside was the certified prenup. The temporary order. Printed screenshots. And June's evidence index referencing the porch camera footage. Evan saw the top page and went pale. Marilyn did not notice. She was still talking. You have always been practical, Claire. So be practical now. Let them stay until the baby comes. Transfer the house discussion to mediation. Stop listening to this attorney and think about family. Her voice softened on that last word. Polished and poisonous. Family. The word she used when she needed my property to sound like her virtue. I looked at Evan. Then, at Lila. Then, at Marilyn. Standing under the hallway light in the house she had tried to shame me out of. My hand rested on the folder. June stood beside me. Quiet as a locked safe. The officer shifted near the door. For the first time, everyone in that foyer waited for me, instead of speaking over me. So I opened the folder and said, All right. Marilyn. Let's talk about what the camera saw. The foyer went silent in a way I had never heard my own house become silent. Not peaceful. Not empty. Silent like a room where every person suddenly understands the next sentence will matter. Marilyn's mouth tightened. But she recovered first because women like her are trained to treat evidence as rudeness. Camera, she said, almost laughing. Claire. This is exactly what I mean. You are behaving like a private investigator instead of a wife. I didn't install it, I said. Mrs. Donnelly's porch camera recorded the night Evan put my suitcase outside. Evan looked toward the window as if he could see through the wall to the neighboring house. Lila's hand dropped from her stomach. Marilyn's expression froze for half a second, then rearranged itself into a fence. That woman watches everyone, she said. Half the neighborhood knows she's nosy. June opened her leather portfolio and removed a printed still from the footage. She did not hand it to Marilyn. She placed it on the entry table where everyone could see. The image showed Evan on my porch at 1139 p.m., dragging my gray suitcase through the open door. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Behind him, through the doorway, Lila stood in my robe beside the staircase. Nobody spoke. The photograph was not dramatic. That made it worse. It looked ordinary. Almost domestic. Like a man taking out luggage before a trip. But anyone who knew the story could see the cruelty inside the frame. My sleeve caught in the zipper. Evan's hand on the suitcase handle. Lila's bare feet on the hardwood I had paid to restore after a pipe burst 3 winters earlier. June placed another page beside it. A transcript excerpt. The audio is partial, she said. But clear enough. Evan stepped forward. June. Come on. She looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Whitaker. Do not address me informally in a legal matter. The officer near the door lowered his eyes. But I saw his jaw move like he was trying not to react. Marilyn reached for the page. Read the line. And went pale beneath her makeup. She had taught her son many things. But she had not taught him how to be careful while being cruel. The transcript read, "She's pregnant. Claire. You're not." There it was. Stripped of tone. Stripped of excuses. Stripped of snow and breath and shock. A sentence that showed exactly how replaceable he thought I was. That is taken out of context, Evan said. His voice cracked on context. It was an emotional night. I looked at him calmly. For me. Yes. Lila made a small sound. Half sob. Half protest. I didn't know he was going to put you out like that, she said. He told me you had agreed to stay somewhere else. I turned to her. You brought 2 bags at 9:12 p.m. Her face changed. That was the moment I knew Mrs. Donnelly's older footage had frightened her more than the snowstorm clip. June placed the evidence index on top of the folder. Not all the photographs. Just the list. 4 prior dates. 4 entries. 4 times Lila had entered my home while I was working late. Visiting my mother's grave. Or attending an insurance conference in Salt Lake City. Evan dragged a hand down his face. Claire. Please. This doesn't need to be some public execution. I almost admired how quickly he moved from denial to damage control. He did not ask whether I was okay. He did not apologize for the table runner, the suitcase, the robe, or the winter night. He asked only that the truth remained small enough for him to survive comfortably. Marilyn turned on Lila then. But only with her eyes. It was quick, cold, and revealing. Lila was useful as long as she protected Evan's image. The second evidence appeared. She became a liability in a cashmere coat. I watched Lila realize it, too. Her tears stopped. She clutched the duffel strap and looked at Evan like a woman, suddenly understanding she had been promised shelter by a man who did not own the roof. June spoke before the room could rot any further. The temporary order requires Ms. Bennett to leave the property today. Mr. Whitaker may retrieve his personal belongings by scheduled appointment. Supervised. Pending the occupancy hearing. Any attempt to remove documents, fixtures, financial records, or premarital assets will be treated as a violation. Her tone was calm. Almost boring. That made it beautiful. Marilyn looked at me. You would really do this, to the father of a child? No. I said. Evan did this to his child when he built that child's first story inside another woman's home. The sentence landed harder than I expected. Evan flinched. Lila looked down. Marilyn opened her mouth. But nothing came out immediately. And that silence felt like the first honest thing she had ever given me. Then Evan tried one final door. His voice softened. Lowered into the private tone he used when he wanted me to remember better years. Claire. We loved each other. You know we did. Don't let lawyers turn us into enemies. I looked at the man who had once kissed flour from my cheek while we made pancakes in that kitchen. I let myself remember him fully. Then I let the memory stand beside the footage. Love doesn't put a suitcase in the snow. I said. Love doesn't move another woman into my robe and ask me to be decent about it. Love doesn't need a witness to tell the truth. His eyes reddened then. But I did not know if it was grief or fear. Maybe both. Consequences can look like heartbreak when they finally arrive. Lila left first. She walked past me with her duffel. Chin lifted. Eyes wet but hard. At the door. She paused. For 1 second. I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, I hope you never know what it feels like to be scared and pregnant. I held the door open. I hope you never confuse being scared with having the right to harm another woman. She stepped into the cold without answering. Evan watched her go. Then looked at me as if I had personally invented winter. Marilyn followed Lila to the porch. Whispering urgently into her phone. Probably arranging a hotel. A cousin's guest room. Or a new version of events. The officer remained near the entry. June stayed beside me. I stood in my own foyer holding the red folder. And for the first time in days, I did not feel like a displaced person. The hearing 2 weeks later was not a movie scene. Nobody screamed. Nobody confessed in a burst of guilt. Evan's attorney argued residency, hardship, and emotional complexity. June argued ownership, contractual breach, abandonment, unauthorized occupancy, and documented misconduct. Mrs. Donnelly submitted a sworn statement. The footage was admitted for limited purposes. Evan kept his eyes on the table while the judge reviewed the timeline. When the judge granted me exclusive temporary possession of the house and enforced the relevant prenup provisions pending final divorce proceedings, I felt no victory rush. I felt tired. Deeply. Cellularly tired. Evan had to vacate within 48 hours. Lila was not permitted to return. Household accounts were frozen for review. Any marital funds used for the affair would be traced. The clean lines of paper had done what pleading never could. Outside the courthouse, Marilyn caught up with me near the glass doors. She looked smaller in daylight. Less like a matriarch, and more like a woman whose authority had depended on everyone else lowering their eyes. You've destroyed him, she said. I turned. No. I stopped letting him use me as storage for his consequences. Her lips trembled. Whether from anger or something closer to shame. I did not stay long enough to find out. Evan called me once that night from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me wanted to hear the end without giving it a place to live. Claire, he said. His voice sounded hollow. I don't know where to go. I looked around the hotel room where I had spent 2 weeks because he decided my home belonged to his crisis. You should call your mother, I said. He was quiet. Then, very softly. That's it. I thought of the snow. The suitcase. The blue robe. The table runner. The text telling me not to be dramatic. That's more help than you gave me. I hung up before he could turn my boundary into another negotiation. When I moved back into Maple Ridge Drive, the house felt bruised. Not ruined. Bruised. Evan had taken his clothes, his gaming chair, the sound system, and the espresso machine he once claimed made the kitchen civilized. He had left nail holes, dust outlines on shelves, and a faint dent in the bedroom wall where his dresser had stood. Lila had left one hair tie behind the bathroom trash can. I threw it away without ceremony. The first thing I cleaned was the dining room table. I washed it slowly. Then unfolded my mother's stained runner under the light. The soy sauce mark did not come out completely. I tried gentle soap, cold water, baking soda, everything the internet suggested. A pale shadow remained across one blue square. Stubborn as memory. At first, I cried over it. Then I stopped trying to erase it. I took the runner to a seamstress downtown. A woman named Gloria who wore red glasses and asked no questions beyond fabric care. She stitched a narrow line of silver thread around the stain. Not hiding it. Framing it. When she handed it back, she said, "Some marks become part of the design if you stop pretending they are not there." I paid her double and cried in my car for a different reason. The divorce took months. Evan fought small things because small control was all he had left. He wanted certain furniture. He wanted reimbursement for renovations he had never paid for. He wanted language that made the affair sound like separation. June refused every sentence that lied. The final agreement enforced the prenup. Protected my house. Divided what was truly marital. And left Evan with exactly what paper said he had earned. I never met the baby. I hope that child grows up loved, safe, and far away from the adult wreckage that came before them. I mean that. Children do not ask to be born inside betrayal. But I also learned that compassion for an innocent person cannot require the continued sacrifice of another innocent person. That was the line everyone kept trying to blur. I finally stopped handing them the eraser. People asked if I forgave Evan. They asked carefully at first, then boldly, as if enough time turned betrayal into a discussion topic. I told them the truth. I did not carry daily hatred. Hatred is heavy, and I had already carried enough luggage through snow. But forgiveness, the kind people demanded from me, sounded too much like giving him back access to my peace. So I chose something quieter. No contact except through lawyers until everything ended. Then no contact at all. I blocked his number. I blocked Marilyn. I mailed his last documents through June's office. I changed the locks, the alarm code, the Wi-Fi password, and the emergency contact on my medical forms. Healing, I discovered, is often administrative before it becomes emotional. That spring, the maple tree bloomed late. I stood on the porch one morning with coffee in my hands and watched tiny green leaves open against a clean blue sky. The same porch where Evan had set my suitcase. The same steps I had walked down in thin shoes while another woman stood warm behind him. For a while, I thought that memory would own the place forever. But houses remember more than one night. Mine remembered the day I signed the deed alone. It remembered my mother laughing in the kitchen. It remembered me painting the front door blue because I wanted to come home to color. It remembered Mrs. Donnelly crossing the snow with a flash drive in her pocket. It remembered the morning I returned with keys that still belonged to me. I did not win because I was ruthless. I won because I stopped mistaking endurance for love. I stopped confusing privacy with protection. I stopped letting people use family, pregnancy, reputation, and forgiveness as tools to make my boundaries look cruel. The truth did not make the betrayal painless. It made it impossible for everyone else to keep decorating the pain and calling it my duty. Sometimes silence is survival. Sometimes silence is strategy. And sometimes silence is just the last calm breath before a woman opens a folder and lets the facts speak in a room full of people who thought she would keep bleeding politely. Evan kicked me out in the snow to move his pregnant mistress in. I left silently. Then morning came. And so did everything he signed.